Hello, greetings, fellow Earthlings. And my name is John Peterson, and welcome to the Great Debate Community Channel, a YouTube channel brought to you by Steve McCrae. I always like to start off by thanking Steve for allowing me to do this each week. I have also decided today, and if anybody has a problem with this, please let me know in the live chat if my visage is just too horrible for you to stand for an hour and a half or 2 hours. But I've decided to go on camera today because of the issues we're going to talk about, and because of the fact that these three lovely human beings that have joined me today, albeit that a couple of them do get some hate thrown at them on social media. They are all on camera, and I would have been a coward not to be on camera myself, so I've chosen to be on camera with these strong individuals. And one thing I want to start out by saying, there is going to be perhaps some trolls show up to this broadcast. When we tweeted out about this on social media and on Twitter and elsewhere, there was some blowback received from the usual sources that are, always spreading their hate and vitriol. What we have decided as a panel, and this goes out to any mods that are in the live chat, if these trolls show up and they are, saying the same hateful things that they always say to these women, if they are, being hateful, do not time them out. Please do not delete the comments. Do not time them out. As a matter of fact, it was asked of me to present those comments on the screen, and we will be doing that. And please, everybody that's on the panel, I have a tendency of not being able to follow the live chat completely. So if you see something that you want presented, let me know. So there's no better indictment of these hateful people than to allow their words to be seen by everybody today while we're live, and in the future as people watch this as a video. So do not time them out. Do not erase their comments, and we will be presenting those comments on screen as they show up, if they show up. Now, we're going to start out just for a couple minutes here before we go into the topic discussion, and we're going to talk to Saff of Saff.com, as you can see her name on the screen there. And we're going to talk to her about her YouTube channel. What's the name of your YouTube channel, Saff?
We're called The Sitting Skeptics. So I currently lead us at the moment. We did have a founder, and everyone who has been following us knows who he is. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to put his safety in jeopardy, but our followers are aware of him. And he started it up from Pakistan. And now we are a group of young ex-Muslims. So there's me and my current co-host, Luna, who's based in the US, and she's a closeted bisexual ex-Muslim. And we talk about our experiences with Islam and just topics within religion. So our recent show, we talked about what it's like living as an ex-Muslim. So she talks from a closeted perspective. I talk from being closeted to the various stages of being public. And this week, we've recorded an episode with a Muslim girl who's had doubts with Islam. And through that show, we really want to show that, ex-Muslims and Muslims can converse with each other and have a rational, calm conversation, which you don't tend to see on Twitter. And our real aim is to provide a safe space for young ex-Muslims, because that doesn't seem to really exist at the moment. A lot of it's, again, for adults. And the young ex-Muslims are speaking up a lot more. You see it all over Twitter. There's a lot in Pakistan as well as in the Western world.
And so how long have you had your channel up and running?
We started in September. We had 4 videos, but we had to take them down because they had our founder's voice on, and it was for his safety reasons. And now we currently have one and another one coming out Sunday at 6 p.m. UK time as well.
And is it like a weekly thing, or how often do you?
Yeah, we do it weekly. So we try and arrange it around everyone's schedules as best and work with time zones. So next week's one, we try to keep them to every Sunday.
Okay, well, I see I'm going to have to coordinate with you because on the Amateur Conversationalist, I do Sundays as well. So I'll have to coordinate with you because I don't want to be streaming at the same time you do.
We pre-record ours anyway, so I can release later and stuff like that.
Well, I wouldn't ask you to do that, but I can definitely work my schedule around you without any problem. And could you say the name of the channel again? I didn't quite catch
The Skeptics. We're on Twitter as well.
Okay, the Sinning Skeptics. Yeah, I've seen that tag on Twitter. Just real quick, so you say that your founder, because his voice and his likeness has been out there, has caused him some trouble, and that kind of is related to the topic we're going to talk about today. I mean, is he okay? Is he?
Yeah, he's fine. He's doing well. Like, I'm in contact with him. Yeah, that's as much as I can say. I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the Sinning Skeptics.
Yeah.
Here on YouTube, we will put a link to her channel in the description and everybody's information in the description, to their platforms on social media or their YouTube channels, whatever the case may be, and in a pinned comment as well after this post is a video. So go over and check out Sinning Skeptics, give them a sub, and more content to come. It had to be erased, she said, because of security issues, but there's more content on the way. So today we have some ex-Muslim women here to talk about issues, ex-Muslim or or atheist women. That's what I'm trying to say. That some of two of which are ex-Muslims, and one of which I believe is an ex-Christian or has never been religious at all. I can't remember, Kelly.
No, so I feel like I'm the odd duck here, but hopefully I can pitch in something. I can just sit here listening to Saff and Fay and just want to hug them, and I can't. So I'll just be here as help.
Cyber hug.
Okay.
Yeah.
Saff and myself have been saying for like the last 2 days that we want to meet up, but she's all the way across England and I'm here.
So
But we want to talk about issues unique to atheist women with a focus on the issues that are unique to ex-Muslim women, and talk about how women are in a lot of religious traditions are considered second-class citizens. And we're going to let Fay start the conversation off and tell us about some of the issues that these ladies are going to cover tonight. Take it away, Fay.
Yeah. So I wanted to open because I feel like I've been the most recent victim of this, along with Heretical Grey or Nick, who couldn't join us tonight, because she was in the fray of it as well. It was over the course of about 3 or 4 days where we were getting consistent hatred simply for posting selfies. And it was started because, and I was trying to have a clean week because I've had quite an intense October for someone who's trying to be sober for a month. And I had made the intention of this week being as unproblematic, as undramatic as possible. And I had seen a tweet in the timeline with this girl who was saying that all ex-Muslim women are ugly or something like that. And instead of creating a problem, I decided to create a thread where we could all just upload our selfies and just feel good about ourselves, be positive. Mental Health Day had just gone by. So, it felt like a good thing to do. And instead, the Muslim community on Twitter had taken that and just, I'm not even sure why, they just found a reason to pile hatred onto us. I think Nick got called fat quite a few times. Myself, I just got called a bunch of different things. I'm not even sure why.
You got called under the sun.
Huh?
You got called everything under the sun. Like, that's all I could see from Twitter was abuse.
But I mean, I'm not at that point. I didn't want to cause any problems, so I was just retweeting them. I had 3 or 4 different tweets of mine go completely viral. So my phone was just having severe mental problems because it was just buzzing every 5 seconds. There was something going on. And then instead of any of the reports that I submitted being handled in any kind of mature way by Twitter itself, my account got completely locked because of my Blasphemy Day video where I drew Muhammad. And the way that tweet is phrased and the video that accompanies it, there's nothing remotely hateful or offensive in it besides the fact that I drew Muhammad, which I guess could be considered hateful, but it isn't by Twitter standards because people have posted things like that before without any problems. And I think that that's a theme. There's definitely a more severe reaction to atheist women or women who leave religion or irreligious women or women who just go against the grain, as opposed to men who do the exact same thing. And that's what we wanted to talk about today.
Just real quick, I saw a post from a mod out there. Look, I know what the rules normally are in the chat, okay? But we're telling you not to time them. I haven't seen any of those comments yet, but if they do show up, do not erase them, do not time them out. That is what I am telling you, okay? And if you do time someone out or erase the comment, then I'm going to take your branch away. Okay, it's as simple as that. So I understand what you're saying, what the rules normally are, but today, if those people show up and start throwing hate at the panel, we're going to allow those comments to stand. So go ahead.
I think the reason for that, and I had requested that specifically because I had done that on my own account. Instead of just constantly talking down to the people who were talking down to us, I thought we would highlight, and I actually made a compilation. It's by no means all of the hate comments, but it is a select few that I enjoyed. I made a compilation on my channel and accompanied it with the King Under the Mountain music, which I think suits it perfectly. And I think that we really, really need to highlight the kind of hatred that people have. No other reason than that we are irreligious and that we are women. That is it. That is the only reason that they hold any kind of hatred for us. And I think that kind of hatred, while it's toxic, while yes, we need to stop it, I think that it also needs to be highlighted as something that is a problem. And that's why I've requested that they are put on screen for everyone to see. Well,
and as we were talking about earlier, I mean, there's no better evidence that there are hateful people out there than to allow their words to stand. So I saw the tweet that you're talking about, and I was very surprised, just as Saff had said that, it was really not a response to the hate you were getting prior to that. It was like, oh, okay, people are going to claim that all ex-Muslim women are ugly. Well, hey, let's just do you didn't even mention that. You just said, hey, let's do a selfie thread. And then the amount of hatred. Go ahead, Saff.
Yeah, it was just a selfie thread to show, it's just ex-Muslim beautiful. So any ex-Muslim posted pictures. It was some people who hadn't posted pictures before were just sharing them. There was no way the Muslim community was mentioned whatsoever. But then they jumped on and they were calling the women faced most of the abuse. And then you see, I remember seeing Halima tweet the next day saying she had woke up to 500 or so quote tweets of her appearance, just her appearance.
It was so bad. It was so bad. And I can say for myself that in all of the time that I've been an activist for all of these things, for ex-Muslim women, for free speech, for religious freedom, for all of the things that I've been an activist for, that was the tamest tweet that I ever put out. And I really don't understand why people were so riled up about it. There was not 5 minutes where people weren't commenting on it. It was the strangest thing. It's like they just can't stand us having a good time.
Yeah, and even I tended to not face that much criticism because I've only recently been quite open on Twitter. But the first lot of criticism that I received was on my appearance. And then today, I've been called mentally ill several times by the same person. So yeah, there's very few that tend to go logically at you or try to defend Islam. It tends to be appearance or otherwise.
Yeah, I've found that as well. I think the thing that people liked saying about me was that my green hair really took away from my argument for some reason. It I don't know. I don't know.
I don't get that. I don't get how something as superficial as, I say superficial in the sense that, your hair can change. I often wonder, I think, did somebody say to Mary Curie, oh no, you can't be a scientist, your brows aren't on point? I mean, who says that? What does that have to do with anything? I could shave my head and I'd still be the same person with the same, hopefully, fairly decent intellect. I don't know, but I don't get that. But it's because they're trying to cut you. They're trying to, push you down, and it's such a lazy form of argument. I think that's what pisses me off.
And just a few minutes before Saff said what she just did, the gentleman posted the same thing. With a question, all ex-Muslim women are ugly. How does that logic? I mean, it's not logical at all. It's
there's no logic. It's simply a personal attack. It was all a series of personal attacks, but Twitter didn't want to handle that. That Twitter did not want to address the fact that an entire community was attacking another community, and instead decided to silence the people who were being attacked. Halima's account got closed down. My account got closed down. Nick's account got. I think she was temporarily locked before she got her account back. It's bizarre to me that, and all of the accounts that I had decided to report, and I don't typically report accounts because I feel like if someone wants to take their day out on me, I would rather they do that through an online platform than take it out on an actual person in real life. I feel like that it's the lesser of two evils. I'm fine with people taking their day out on me. But the ones that got quite serious, like the death threats and the targeted harassment tweets, those ones I did end up reporting, and Twitter found no problem with them. They had responded within a few hours and had said that there were no problems with them, and that, in a very polite way, they had said, be more careful about who you report. It's so strange that was allowed to abide, whereas all of my tweets, which were in no way negative at all, were closed. My entire account is unlocked because of them.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but before your account got locked, but there's this one girl, she didn't even post in the thread. She just tweeted, I don't know why Muslims are saying all ex-Muslims are ugly when I exist. And this one account took her icon and picked apart every part of her facial feature, saying what was wrong with it, when there was nothing wrong with anything. She hadn't even...
I saw that.
And it still is, as far as I'm aware, like yesterday I was still seeing that tweet up, and I've reported it, so many people have. It's still not down as far as I'm aware.
It's still not done. No, it's disgusting, honestly.
Fay, Saff, can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I understand that once you leave Islam, you are in a sort of subset of people. I'm going to get the word wrong. Kafir, is it, or kafir? Where you're you're separate. You're not of the group. Does the sort of ethical behavior of a follower of Islam, is there an edict for speaking to people in a decent manner? Does it transcend the group? Are they still supposed to carry themselves a certain way or speak a certain way? Because if they are, they're not doing it, are they? They're some of the most vilest stuff I've ever seen on Twitter has been from actual followers of Islam. The ones obviously that come after yourselves, but I just wondered, it's almost like they're highlighting the absolute worst of themselves, and I just wondered if there was any sort of ethical blowback that they get from that, or is it just fair game, basically? Hope I've said that clearly enough.
Do you want to take that, and I'll comment afterwards?
So in terms of the naming, because I think it's different when, because a kafir is like a non-believer, but someone an apostate is a murtad, so that's a different word. It's much worse. You've left the fold. Especially since you're born in it, like you've received the best experience of it as you possibly can. So they see you even worse than a non-believer. I feel like the Muslims that I've interacted with, the very few, there were 2 girls that consistently stood up for us and were like, you can't talk to them like that. They are still human beings. But Islamically, I'm not quite sure if there's a certain etiquette, but I mean, they believe we should be killed, so I don't think they're going to treat us.
No, I'm listening back to it thinking, no, I don't think they're worried about saying some mean words to you, but I just wondered if it was like a thing that they're sort of denying of themselves, that they're just it's more personal than it is about Islam.
If I can just comment, so the word kafir is an overarching term for disbelievers. So you're a kafir, everyone who isn't a Muslim is a kafir. It's an overarching term. And there are different grades of kafir. So Ahl Kitab, for example, the Jews and Christians. I'm hearing some feedback. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
You're coming through clear.
Yeah, fine.
All right. Okay. So the Ahl Kitab, which are considered to be Jews and Christians, are considered to be like the best of the kafirs. They get more rights than other kafirs. Mushriks or polytheists have a lower standing because they assign partners to God, and that's considered to be like the worst sin in Islam. Murtads are considered to be people who left the fold, which are definitely worse. You in an Islamic state, you would be killed after 3 days if you didn't re-accept Islam. And you also have a subset of people called munafiqs that you can't kill because they're considered to be hypocrites. But because it's a big thing to call a Muslim a non-Muslim, people can't really call them out. So they're allowed to abide, but they're like shamed for being hypocrites. So there are loads of different subcategories of kafir or disbeliever. And with murtad women, or any kind of women really, because Islam is such a patriarchal religion, and many Muslim or people dissenting Muslim women who would be considered to be munafiqs or hypocrites, and ex-Muslim women, any other kind of disbelieving woman, because they would not cover like a Muslim would, because they live in such an animalistic, such a patriarchal society, which tells people that if a woman is not covering, then she is devaluing herself as a human being, that she is an object for male pleasure. They are viewed in this way. And I think a lot of Muslims don't understand that concept, that when you implant that idea that a woman's worth is only valuable if she's covering, when you implant that idea, even if you do it for the best of intentions, you are immediately discrediting any woman who doesn't cover. And then all of that toxicity comes out. And in the case of preaching or telling people to come back to Islam, Muslims are advised to speak kindly and with reason and with a certain level of etiquette. But because we left Islam, because we were in Islam and now we've left, that level of preaching or the idea of bringing us back isn't really there, because we already let go of the thing that they hold so precious. So we are open to ridicule, and like Saff said, in an Islamic state we would be killed. So really, in their minds, they probably think that they're not doing as much damage as they could be doing. And with all the death threats we also receive, that is made very apparent as well.
It's troubling.
So, and pardon me while I'm popping something in the chat here. I noticed too on Twitter that, and we can, talk a little longer about the social media aspect, but then I'd like to go into a few more of the aspects. But I noticed that Saff, she tweeted out about the broadcast today, and there's been a person in that thread, and obviously a Muslim, that has just been going back and forth with one guy in particular, and then several of us, that just doesn't. He seems to want to equate being an ex-Muslim and talking about being an ex-Muslim. He wants to equate that to treason, he's been in this thread saying that it's treasonous, and that is why there's repercussions for people in Islamic countries. I've gotten asked, I put a few posts in there, and I just noticed somebody asked me, well, what are you an ex-Muslim? As if you have to be an ex-Muslim to comment, like that. Somehow I'm wrong for telling them that they're wrong because I'm not actually an ex-Muslim. But Saff, take a minute and talk about that thread and some of the nonsense that was in that.
Well, I shared the tweet you tweeted out about this live stream, and I quote tweeting saying, I'm really excited to be on here, to have a platform as an ex-Muslim woman to speak out and whatnot, and just saying what time it was. This account, I don't know how the hell they found me, called me a narcissist, and that I said I had psychological issues. I was like, okay, so I'm a narcissist and psychological issues for someone who speaks out, cares about human rights and free speech, and all this stuff that I basically tweet about on a daily basis. And then it kind of went back and forth, and they were trying to equate you should follow the laws of the land, speaking out is treason, people in England were hung, drawn and quartered for this. And I'm like, lady, sir, whoever, people aren't being hung, drawn and quartered in England anymore. That was centuries ago. But the real issue here is people are being imprisoned, flogged and killed in Islamic countries. And this person, every time I made something about this or talked about apostasy laws and blasphemy laws, they were like, oh, well, that's just this. Or they just ignored it. They flat out ignored it and just put through multiple apologist arguments.
That is what they do, unfortunately. And what I've noticed is when we talk about these issues, they seem to think that because the same thing is happening to Muslims in places like China, they say, well, why don't you highlight that? And we do. We talk about it frequently. But do we not also get to talk about atheists who are going through the same thing in Muslim countries? No, because they value specific people over other people. Because some people are Muslim, they deserve to be talked about more than atheists do. And I think that kind of tribal mentality is actually extremely toxic. And in terms of the treason argument, this argument is actually a really, really old argument. It's so old that it was brought up right after the death of the Prophet. And it happened in the first caliphate, the caliphate of Abu Bakr, where people started leaving Islam en masse as soon as the Prophet died. And he would go into those areas and slaughter those people because he considered them to be apostates. And he considered it to be treason because they refused to pay zakat, or it's like a pillar of Islam to pay 2.5% of your yearly income. And because of that, because he wasn't receiving that money, he considered that to be an act of treason, and he killed all those people. Now, it's not treason. It's simply people deciding to believe in something that they, once believed and they don't believe in anymore. It is simply a change of thoughts. And the fact that someone can call that treason is really scary, because you can't even think in a different way than the way that you were born in. If people were killed for converting to Islam, we'd be hearing about it left, right, and center all day, every day. But because it's people leaving Islam to become atheists, become social rejects, become completely ostracized from their families, from their countries, from everything, people don't care about that because they're loners and they're outsiders and nobody is talking about them.
Well, and when you talk about how apostates, people, atheists that coming out in certain countries can be killed for it. I mean, Saff's founder of her channel, he has to, kind of go into hiding as far as like social media or YouTube goes because of the repercussions he can suffer. In that thread we were talking about, this person, man or woman, whoever it is, Khaleja or something like that. Yeah. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but they had said in one of their tweets, in Islam, apostasy is punished with death when linked to treason. And I responded back, you have unwittingly stated the source of the problem. Apostates need not modify their behavior. It is the barbarism employed by Islamic states that must be reformed. And they responded back that the reform was a good word for treason. So here, this person not only has all these preconceived notions about, what ex-Muslims, atheists, apostates are and how they act, which mostly false, but here he or she is equating the call for reform to treason. That's the problem, not ex-Muslims being vocal.
Yeah.
The problem is that person as well. Then I remember like one of another ex-Muslim on Twitter then like told me that this same person was someone who called him a homosexual on his selfie and then started tagging their friends to then attack others. So at that point, once again, I was debating with this person, then you were, John, and then several other people came, and I was like, I've had enough. I've said the same thing over and over again. It's like talking to a brick wall, essentially.
When they group together like a mob, it stops being productive. There were a few people who asked me questions, why I left Islam, why I thought the way I did, and as soon as I answered, they tagged all their friends, and it just became, for lack of a better term, a gangbang. It just became people coming into my timeline and just having a heyday. And I don't know if it's because as a practicing Muslim, you have very few things to entertain yourself with. Saff's dropped off. I hope she comes back. I don't know if that's the case. If it's just a symptom of the fact that it's just long periods of boredom and you can't do anything. Or if it's simply because these people are toxic, and like there's no helping that. There is no helping that.
Faye, has there ever been a time, perhaps more in person, or that you've got the idea that you might be sort of making some leeway or gaining some ground with someone, that it must seem like you're constantly sort of banging your head up against a brick wall, but has there ever been a time where you think you've come away from talking to a believer and leaving them with something to think about, or is it always just negative pushback?
I think there have been times. I have a few on my main account. I do have a few Muslim followers who I've made some headway with, and they follow my content and they'll support me whenever the time comes to support me. But I found that the most amount of progress that I've made has only been in person, really. On social media, because I truly think that social media brings out the worst in people, because you're hiding behind a screen, because you can hide behind a username and a fake photo. Mm-hmm. I think it does bring out the worst in people in that sense, especially when you're talking about politics and religion, and it's so easy to become toxic. It's just really. But in person, in the last 2 or 3 months, I think I've made more Muslim friends than I ever thought I would make since leaving religion. I've made Shia friends, I've made Ahmadi friends, I've made Sunni friends. I had dinner with Ali Dawa. I think that the way to go about it, really, if we want to change the views of people, is to do it in person, because online it's just too much of a no man's land.
You need a human connection.
So I've more or less stopped debating. I really don't like using that term for what we do on Twitter, but I've stopped arguing with people online for that reason, because I really don't think that there's much progress to be made there. There's way more progress that can be made in person. And there's just that recognition that you're talking to a human being. Whereas when you're talking through a screen, I think it's more difficult to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, and as we've seen on Twitter, people stepping in, Muslims stepping in at your defense, calling out the Muslims that are being hateful and, spewing threats. So take a few minutes, or as long as you want, and just talk about like the specific repercussions that people can suffer for leaving Islam, especially like in Islamic controlled countries. Whichever one of you
Saff,
wants
you want to start?
Yeah. So in Islamic controlled countries, it varies. Some have outlaw straight apostasy laws. Then there's Pakistan, which doesn't have apostasy laws, but it has a blasphemy law, which being an apostate is considered blasphemy. So you are targeted for that. In the Western world, you can face honor killings depending on what your family is like. But the most common thing is shunning and ostracism. So this is where your family, friends, community will cut ties with you because you are an ex-Muslim. They do not want to be associated with you in any sort of way. So yeah, there's various extremes. Faye can attend to most of those experiences as well.
Well, being an ex-Muslim in the UK is a luxury compared to being an ex-Muslim anywhere else in the world. You know, being an ex-Muslim in the West, myself, I've been disowned. I get sometimes I get voicemails from my family members which aren't so pleasant, text messages. You know, they'll make ghost accounts and they'll write very specific stories about me on my YouTube page and things like that. So it's just petty harassment is what it is. But in other countries, in countries like Pakistan, in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, and about 13 to 14 other countries around the world, you have countries that enforce blasphemy laws for people who leave Islam, for people who talk about Islam, or people who just want a more progressive version of Islam. We have such, you know, accounts as Sahel Arabi, who's in prison for 7 years simply for writing a Facebook post about the Prophet Muhammad. He's been tortured. He's been forcibly separated from his wife and child. His mother is currently facing a sentence because she's been trying to get him out of prison. We have Raif Badawi, who's in prison in Saudi Arabia. We have several feminists, Muslim feminists, in prisons in Saudi Arabia. In Pakistan, they have frequently, you know, persecuted minorities like the Ahmadi community who are Muslims, but because the Pakistani government does not recognize them as Muslims, it is literally blasphemy for them to identify themselves as Muslims. They can be charged and sentenced for that, and even put to death. They have minorities, Christian minorities in Pakistan, who are frequently put under blasphemy laws to be imprisoned and then later sentenced to death. The LGBT community across the world, across the board, really are persecuted throughout, you know, in developing countries and low-income countries because of these laws and because of the horrid stereotyping and just misconceptions about them and how they're seen. In Somalia, you have lootings, you have the mob chasing people down because of leaving Islam, because they're LGBT, because they want reform. In Nigeria, you have the same thing. Across the world, you have people rotting in prisons. In Malaysia, they posted a picture of a group of atheists and demanded that those atheists be hunted down and killed and lynched by the mob. Across the world, you have people rotting in prisons. You have people on death row, people who have already been killed because of the things that they think in their brain, not even because of the things that they're doing outwardly. And it's a fight that no one is talking about, really. It seems to be a taboo topic. Anytime we bring it up, we're called racists, we're called bigots, we're called Islamophobes. And I don't know how to show, and it's a ridiculous assumption to make, to think that just because we've left Islam that we don't also face anti-Muslim bigotry. When people meet for the first time, they assume I'm Muslim. The fact that people still make that, I'm still stopped in airports, you know, I'm still racially profiled. We still go through anti-Muslim bigotry despite the fact that we are not Muslim anymore. That is why we identify ourselves as a minority within a minority. To say that we are being Islamophobic when we are still profiled in the same way is a non-argument. It's not a thing.
And
because we have Muslim family members, we have Muslim friends.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also a non-argument because I've seen on social media where you specifically and other ex-Muslims have posted on social media that you are against Islamophobia, and you have appealed to people. You know, we're not, you know, making the claims that we are or talking about the fact that we are ex-Muslims because we want, you to go out there and go after Muslims, and we don't want anything bad to happen to Muslims. I mean, I've heard you guys post things like that, seen you post things like that all the time.
Yeah, and I will frequently, I'll call my fan base by saying that if there are people who are against Muslim people, who are against immigrants, who are, who are just racist, to be honest, if I will frequently cull my following by saying things like, I don't want you to be following me, I don't support you. And, as someone who is brown, who comes from a Muslim background, has Muslim family members, and is an immigrant to this country, I cannot understand people telling me that I am racist and bigoted against those people. It makes literally no sense.
Yeah, I mean, I can't get that either. I mean, and like the repercussions you're talking about, basically people are being killed and maimed and shunned for their ideas. And that's antithetical to what most Western countries believe. And I don't understand, why in a lot of instances we have, as a country, have relationships with some of these other countries that are doing horrible things to their citizens. Another topic that you folks had discussed in the text chat on the Discord server where we were talking, and I know it's something that you've done a video on before, topic on Kelly, about child brides, and how young women, girls are married off in religions, and how even here in America they point to it, how young people are being married in other countries as kind of cover for, well, there's nothing wrong with it, other cultures do it, and things like that. But if you want to talk a little bit about that, and maybe get Fay and Saff's input on that.
Sure. Well, it's a global issue, and it's no less an issue in the West. UNICEF, along with Western governments and governments across the world, are hoping to eradicate child marriage in the countries that currently legalize it by 2030. And it was a shock to me in regards to it being quite prevalent in the West. I wanted to concentrate on the American numbers because there's actually more of a prevalence of it in America, probably due to the population size, I should imagine, rather than the UK. But it's very surprising. 12 million girls worldwide marry before the age of 18 every year. That number is decreasing, but ever so slowly, as certain countries get better laws. In fact, one of the most shocking things I think I read when I was doing my initial research is that Afghanistan, Honduras, and Malawi actually have more stringent and strict guidelines when it comes to marriageable age than some states in America. So let that sink in. The reason I discussed it in one of my videos was in regards to its connection with evangelical groups and things like that, or communities that are religious, varying different religions, and it did seem quite prevalent in states where there was a high number of particular religions, and it was supposedly an idea that it gives a young woman standing if they're married young, and usually to an older man. The statistics vary depending on the state, but it's usually people around 16 that are married, but usually to people who are 20 and above. Young boys are married off as well. I think one of the youngest ages was in Missouri. 12 and 13-year-olds have been married off. Some states don't actually have, or don't, for some reason, don't release their statistics. So 12 states in America don't actually, you can't sort of check the statistics on this. But needless to say, that sounds quite dodgy. One of the, you can't just sort of run off, take a kid and go marry them. You either have to have parental consent. Pregnancy is sometimes involved, which I'll leave you to your sort of thing of how that's come about, and also a judge permitting. So all these things do come into play, and there's not always, you don't sort of get the history behind whether they are a couple, a legitimate couple, whether the usually there are some boys married off, but it's largely an issue with young ladies. What the relationship is between them, if the girl is pregnant, it can be certainly discussed. That it's a way to not sort of get out of it, but to avoid statutory rape charges. Sometimes they are influenced by their parents. These are more in the testimonials. Like I said, there's not details given on the date of marriage as to, oh, why are you marrying this person? Because that's not really what they want to know. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of very strict guidelines about it. It's like, you want to get married, what do your parents think, sort of thing. And that's it. There's not a lot of stringent laws, or even just sort of, like I said, guidelines about it. It's very easy. Missouri, like I said, in particular, is rife with it. People actually travel there. It's called the child bride sort of hub of America. And it's only within the last year that Delaware and New Jersey became the first states to outlaw marriage for anyone under the age of 18, with no exceptions, pregnancy or otherwise. I mean, even if a small percentage of that was two people terribly in love, it's still an issue. At least for the fact that when a child is married, they legally have to wait until they're 18 to be able to divorce the person they're married. So even within that space and time, any abuse and things like that have to be put up with until they can legally file for divorce. So the fact that you have to wait until you're 18 in most states, according to my data, to be able to divorce, but they allow you to marry before that age.
Yeah, so it's they can marry you off, and then you can do nothing about it until you're of age. That just seems insane.
Yes, and you'll get a lot of people. Sorry, John, I cut you off. But
you're right.
You'll get a lot of people saying, well, if they're pregnant, it's better that they be married and be secure. I mean, there's all sorts of issues with that sort of thing, but the data just doesn't hold up to that fact. According to a Forbes article, which was actually done in conjunction with UNICEF USA, regarding the child marriage issue in America, girls between the ages of 15 and 19 are twice as likely to die in childbirth as women in their 20s. Newborn children of younger mothers face greater risks of dying as well, and between 70 and 80% of child marriages end in divorce. So we're not talking about get married young, be fruitful, you'll have a great stable marriage. I mean, you can say that about people get married at any age, but what I'm saying is there doesn't seem to be a positive to it largely. And the fact that parents, some states, only one parent has to consent. The other person might be completely against it. And of course, they can seek legal help in regards to stopping it going ahead. But the parent, it might be a single parent. So of course, they're going to make the decision. But yeah.
So Fay and Saff, is this something you experienced when you were Muslims? Do you have any stories of maybe people in your family or people where young girls were being married off in Islam?
Not in my family, no. In, say, my parents' generation, the youngest they would be married, like some of my aunties were married at 16, but nothing child marriage, particularly from my own background or from any family members or anybody I knew. No.
Fay?
So within my family, my maternal grandmother, she was married off to my grandfather when she was about 9. I have an aunt who was married to my uncle when she was 15, and my uncle was 20 or 21. In terms of myself, my family wanted to marry me off ever since I turned 15. And the first man who proposed to me, I say proposed in very severe quotation marks, but the first man who proposed to me was about 26. So it is a definite problem in our communities, and whenever we talk about it, we bring up a story from prophetic traditions where the Prophet Muhammad married a 6-year-old. And As much as people like to argue that she wasn't actually 6, she was 12, and the timelines don't make sense.
Some people are saying
narration-
20 now. It makes, but
Yeah.
people are trying to say any sort of age at this point.
The mental gymnastics that people play is just ridiculous. The fact of the matter is that there are authentic sources that Muslims follow. We're not saying that those sources are in any way credible, but they are credible to Muslims. And the person who speaks of the age of that bride is the bride herself. She says that she was married at 6, and Muhammad consummated that marriage, meaning he raped her. And it is rape because she was a child, and childs cannot consent to any kind of sexual activity. He raped her when she was 9, and she narrated that specific tradition. It came from her mouth, according to Muslim sources. And that is the biggest evidence that we have that allows people in our communities to marry children to grown men. And it's mainly grown men that marry children. I've very rarely heard of an elderly woman marrying a young boy. Very, very rarely heard of that. I'm assuming that such a thing would be greatly frowned upon in our communities if it happened. Women in our communities, even though divorce is allowed in Islam, divorce is still seen as something problematic and disgusting, and those women are, outcasts in society. They understand.
It makes it once you're known as a divorcee, to try and get remarried, say in the arranged marriage way, it just doesn't happen unless you get married to a ridiculously older man.
Yeah, and it's really disgusting. It's really disgusting because even in countries like my own country, in Bangladesh, the legal age of marriage is 18, but in the villages, no one actually cares to check. There was an incident, I believe it was a Pakistani couple here in the UK who got their daughter married off in Pakistan and brought her home, and the authorities could do very little about it because she got married in a different country. We, as an educator in a school, as someone who works in schools, and as someone who hears the plight of many brown and minority young girls, many girls are taken out of this country and married off in their own countries to much older men, either to get them into this country with a visa or to just control the girl by making her
the punishment. If you are, there are some girls
rebel,
or like if they rebel, they're like, they'll even joke about that, like, oh, my parents will marry me off. But it's so for a lot of girls, that's not a joke. Their parents will do that to them.
It is an extremely dark joke, and it's such a cruel reality because we run training with staff every year, and it's just not taken seriously. We see these girls just disappear from our classrooms and they never come back, and we don't know what happens to them. We don't know if they've been married off, if there's been an honor killing, if we just don't know. They just completely disappear from our lives, and it's just in the back of your brain, like, what happened to that girl? All I heard was that something was going on in the family, and then she was just gone. It's something that has happened in our communities for such a long time, and it's just not being addressed.
I remember I think it was when I was watching the Amsterdam event you went to, which was about the one I particularly watched was a conversation on women's dissent, and there was a story about this. It was a Islamic country, I can't remember where, they were trying to bring the age of consent higher for women, for girls, and they, when met in the court of law, the argument that's thrown back at them was, well, like, the Prophet married someone this young. Are you saying the Prophet is wrong? That's it. This conversation is shut down because you can't say the Prophet is wrong because that is blasphemy. In Yemen, they tried to raise the age of marriage, and women protested. Women protested against it. And I think that is the biggest indication of how bad the patriarchy is in our communities. Like, it's one thing, patriarchy here in the West, but when we talk about it in the East, in countries that are developing, in countries that are still very much religious countries, even the women take the side of the oppressors and have a hand in oppressing their own daughters and their own granddaughters. And it's
like in my family, for example, I had refused to marry a man in 2015, and everyone in my family was talking to me as though I was wasting my life by not doing that. And it wasn't men who were telling me that. It wasn't my father who was telling me that. It was my aunts. It was my grandmother. It was every single woman in my family who was saying that if you don't marry this man, you are never going to get married. And when they say a thing like that, when they say that you are never going to get married, it is an admission of them saying that this is the only thing that's valuable for you. If you don't get married, then you have no worth.
Boy, that really speaks to the indoctrination.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing I think my mother was worried about, is people knowing, like when I decided to talk publicly about this, people are going to know about this, and family's going to know about this. It's like your prospects for the future. I'm like, my prospects are going to be fine because I choose them myself. Again, the women in the family talked. No, I only told my parents, my mom then told my grandparents about my atheism and stuff. My grandparents from Pakistan, they were surprisingly accepting. Obviously, they were confused and they couldn't quite understand, but they still, want a relationship and love me and whatever. But the only sort of family member who's messaged me or asked to talk to me about my beliefs is one of my aunties. Again, trying to have a conversation is quite frustrating because it's always, it's not the religion, it's the people. I'm like, but it is the religion. The religion is saying these things. And again, she admits she was not as educated on these issues. Well, I was like, if we're going to have a conversation, I can share with you things, but read up essentially, because you're not going to convince me otherwise. And I, again, had to set that boundary. I left Islam because I didn't believe in God, and the religion itself was then too flawed to even support the notion of God existed. But again, trying to relay that just doesn't go through. It's always the women in the family that tend to talk about these more. The men in the family, either they just haven't said anything to me, really.
I think the men don't need to do it because the women are already pressuring you to do it. I think that's why. But I will say that after I reported my father, because he had almost killed me in his own house, after I reported my father, the only thing that my family members could think to say to me was that no one's going to marry you because you reported your dad. And I think that tells you where their priorities are, that we would rather you died in that house than you not be married, because you are literally less than a dead person. I think that
based on marriage, that is a woman's whole worth, essentially. You can say these things, do these things, and I've been told, okay, yeah, but the one thing everyone's worried about is marriage and what the community will think. I think that's a big thing in Islamic communities. South Asian communities are too concerned about what everybody else will think about them. When you can't live your life like that, otherwise you just go insane. It's so self-critical, such self-loathing.
And let's be real, Saff, let people talk, because we don't want a weak man anyways.
Yeah.
Like, we don't want a man who's gonna be like, oh, you're an atheist, I'm terrified of that. You don't want that anyway.
No.
I don't want a man who's gonna abuse me and expect me not to report him.
Yeah.
So I'm okay. You can keep your men.
Well, so I think I've seen both of you, or if not you, I've seen other ex-Muslims and other atheists as well. In other religions, former other religions. I've heard a lot of people that are atheists say, "Well, we're not looking to eradicate religion. We would just like this, that, and the other thing to go away, or we would like these certain reforms as far as." How religious people, conduct themselves in the public forum, like the way that, in a lot of Eastern countries and Middle Eastern countries, Islam controls the government, and people are against that part of it. Or here in America, Christians get into politics and they want to try and pass laws that fit into their religious beliefs and whatever. So, when it comes to, any religion, like what solution is there here, as far as, we're never going to get rid of religion, but as far as like what's happening to ex-Muslims at the hands of some Muslims, and what happens to some ex-Christians, what can we do to stop this from happening? I mean, is the answer like what we're doing now, just keep talking about it, or?
I mean, talking about it is for ex-Muslims is just being visible enough to show people we exist, because there isn't that many publicly anyway. I mean, now more and more on the rise, but we simply existing for now is working. But there needs to be an eradication of religion and state. It just needs to. It just shouldn't exist, because because even you look at Islam as one religion, as a state, there are so many different sects of Islam. Some don't see others as even believers. Ahmadis are viewed as heretics. There's so many. Even then, you get within Sunni Islam, you have the different schools of thought. There is too much. What's the word?
Diversification.
There's too much diversification. There's too much disagreement on how to even follow the religion in the first place. So keep it to yourselves. Keep it in the private sphere. It does not need to be in the public sphere. It does not need to be in the laws of the land, because it then, having one religion as a priority, then discriminates against others.
I think Islam needs to become as irrelevant as Christianity as a religion. And we need to take it out of politics. That's something that I can completely get behind, is taking religion out of politics. It does not belong there. There is once we put religion into politics, it's so difficult to get it out, because people don't want to reform religion. So it does not belong in politics. It should be completely taken out of politics. That is the first thing we need to do. The second thing we need to do is to normalize people having free thought and thinking for themselves. Unfortunately, that is the biggest problem right now. We have families killing off their family members because they don't want to be like their family members. And that level of intolerance has to stop. It has to be shamed. It has to be something that is completely taboo to do. I don't even understand the mentality. For those of you who are aware of Ali Malik, in his family used to have talks, like family gatherings, about how to kill members of his family. Because that's just how commonplace these discussions are in countries like Pakistan. And that is a terrifying thought, that you doing something against the grain could get you killed. The first thing is to take it out of politics, and the second thing is to normalize free thought, exploration, curiosity. These things are so natural to human beings. It's the only reason that we have progressed, and we are debatably at the top of the food chain. But these things are being suppressed in countries like these countries who have blasphemy laws, or these like vigilante justice, where people just kill people for thinking in a different way.
Well, it's so funny you say that, because that one thread that we were talking about on Twitter, that Saff started, the person in that thread claimed that somebody mentioned it, and then they clapped back with, people aren't being murdered in the street in Islamic countries. And I just thought, wait a minute, and I responded back, your response makes me wonder if you've been living under a rock your whole life.
They were saying, just quietly disbelieve. You can't quietly disbelieve if you're a woman in these countries, especially if you're being forced to wear a hijab, and you quietly disbelieving. Is that just saying, shut up, don't even say anything? What if you want to take up? That is not quietly disbelieving. That's a very obvious action. And why should we quietly disbelieve when nobody's telling you to quietly practice? You're allowed to practice as much as you want to. So why should we quietly disbelieve? We can't quite. And particularly from where I am, I'm not going to quietly disbelieve when there's people who can't even just disbelieve in the first place. So
I think people like you and me, Saff, we're the only people who can speak for these people who can't speak. Yeah. If we don't speak, our entire movement just dies.
Yeah,
they are not capable of doing that, because if they do it, they will be killed. They will be killed by people who are supposed to love them and people that they are supposed to trust. And that is a terrifying thought. Like, I have it easy here. I've been disowned by my family because they're terrified of me influencing the younger members of my family. I'm the oldest granddaughter in my family. I mean, it doesn't change anything. They still talk to me because social media is here now. But it's just a silly thing. If your belief is strong, if your idea is strong, you won't need to cull people for it to continue being strong.
Yeah, again, my family were very receptive to it. I mean, they don't agree with my beliefs. They don't agree the ferocity I kind of go after it with, but they still accept me as a human being and as a person. But again, in these countries, seeing the first-hand effects of it, what it's doing to my friends, what it's then doing to, again, ordinary people just living in these countries, I don't understand, as like a human being who values other human beings' lives, can sit back and not say anything, especially when this group has literally no voice. If we quietly disbelieve, there'd be no one speaking up for them.
Well, speaking on a quiet disbelief, I found it interesting what you said a few moments ago, that, okay, how can you quietly disbelieve? I mean, if you're going to be a woman and become an ex-Muslim, then of course you're going to want to take the hijab off. Well, that's not being very quiet, without even speaking any words. That's making a statement, So it's what are they to do? Become an ex-Muslim? And I'm sure there's many of them in Islamic countries that in their hearts don't believe anymore, but continue to wear the hijab because they're afraid of what repercussions there could be.
Well, the nature of being a quiet disbeliever, what I think she was actually getting at was that she'd quite like to oppress you, Saff.
Yeah.
And oppression in any guise is who the hell has the right to oppress somebody else and to dictate to them how loud their voice is, how quiet their voice is, what they talk about. And getting back to what Fay said, I mean, I'm sorry, my face has literally just been anguished listening to what you're saying, but Fay, it's almost, because I wasn't brought up religious and I'm not around religious people a great deal. To me, the sort of arbitrary nature of what you said in an arbitrary way is almost like my mum saying to me, "I'm going to kill you because you're a vegan." Yeah,
you
know what I mean. I'm not trying to
say
how what religion means to people, but for the fact that you aren't a member of the religion anymore, your life is worth nothing. And replace that with any religion, any type of cult following, any type of belief. You could have 6 people around the table who are family members and 5 of them believe in UFOs and 1 doesn't. It's psychotic. Replace it with any type of belief, but for the fact that you don't believe it anymore, you are to be killed.
Again,
it's like us collectively killing off flat earthers and anti-vaxxers. Like, it's
yeah. Again, like, I was told, if no one has to know about your disbelief until you get married, because I couldn't marry a Muslim man purely because of, you hear the stories where it's like you get married, you have children, and then suddenly they turn around and that's it, my children are going to be raised Muslim. I can't have that risk there. And then I was told, oh, no one will find out about your disbelief until you get married and say you marry whoever. But then why should I have to wait that long? Why should I have to be quiet? Why is it again centered on marriage? Like, what if I don't want to get married? Yeah, what if I don't want to get married? Like,
when I first came out as an apostate to one of my aunts, the first thing, and it was almost instantaneous, the first thing she said is that you should get married to somebody. Find a gay Muslim guy who's from a family and, just get married to him. Just get married to him and then you can do whatever you want. This toxic mentality of keeping the name of the family clean by being oppressed. Being a smiley face while you're just miserable behind closed doors. It's like, I bring it to people who aren't exposed to it, and I genuinely do not know how to explain it to them because they just don't experience the same thing. They don't understand what I'm saying. It takes them a few days to process exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, Fay, you sort of you give me hope in this aspect, because I think either it's on Twitter or Instagram, you have this sort of rundown of your life when you wore the hijab, and when you said you became, I'm trying to remember the right word, not fundamentalist, but you were really sort of hardcore, and then you've gone through this stage of critical thinking. Obviously effects and family matters have happened in between time, but if you can come out of that indoctrination, and I mean familial pressure is so strong, and that can be the case in secular families as well, no matter what the subject. It makes me think, well, there is hope, because you've taken such a hard road, and not only that, but you've got empathy for other people, not just of the form of religion that you were in, but of other religions, because you've been down that road. You've got empathy for secular people. So if you can come out that with that amount of empathy, that might just have been ingrained in you as a person, but considering the level of indoctrination it must take for people to want to kill their family members or want to shun them, if that can be turned, and I don't know how strong you ever felt about things like that before, but if that can be turned into what you guys are showing tonight, then that does give me hope. I've sort of been sitting here just sort of my heart breaking for you, but thinking, is there anything we can do? And you're example of it. You've been there, you've done it, you've come through.
We need to raise, we just need to keep awareness to it, because Muslims are so quick to deny it. Like anytime we bring it up, that's nothing to do with Islam. Yes, it is, because it's happening in Muslim communities, because so clearly there's a correlation. It's just, we need to be louder than the people who deny that these things happen. In the case of forced marriages or arranged marriages, in many cases, because the people who are getting married are so young, it doesn't matter if they have a choice or not, because choice doesn't exist in their mental capacity. They're too young to decide for themselves, and they're just pushed into a marriage before they can understand what that means. In the case of honor killings, it comes from this idea that if people leave Islam, or if a child rebels against you, you're allowed to abuse them, to correct them or discipline them in some way. The argument that this is purely culture and not religion is a non-argument, because both of those things complement each other so heavily. They are so heavily intertwined that it is literally a non-argument. We need to be louder than the people who say and deny these things happen in our communities. There are other issues that we could talk about, like racism, and there's blatant racism in our communities. If a girl from my community wanted to marry someone who was white or black or Far Eastern, any other kind of race, the amount of outrage that would follow them is ridiculous. There are so many things in our communities that need to be highlighted, and these toxic ideas, these harmful ideas, are being protected under the guise of Islamophobia, and we need to stop that. We need to stop using that term, and we need to stop pretending as though these people don't have problems. We have problems in our communities, and we need to solve them critically.
Yeah, Islamophobia is a term. It's so throwaway. It's become a buzzword to shut down any valid criticism. Islamophobia, Islam is something you can be afraid of. It is terrifying in aspects. There are such scary aspects of it. People, you're told to fear God. So yes, you can be afraid of it. The term, again, which doesn't attack Muslims, anti-Muslim bigotry, that's a real thing. And so many ex-Muslims talk about it. I don't think I've seen one who doesn't so far. But yeah, Islamophobia is just being thrown around left, right, and center. I'm like, no, it's just.
I mean, apparently, from what I've seen a lot in social media, there's a lot of people out there that define Islamophobia as disagreeing with any idea that a Muslim has. I mean, and calling people out for bad ideas in no way is bigoted. I mean.
No.
It's not even bad ideas. It's bad
anti-Semitism. You don't have Judeophobia. That's just the simple way to put it. You don't have that.
What was that, Kelly?
Sorry, it just baffles me that I'm sort of sitting here thinking about what I said earlier about the sort of the nature putting in any type of religion or cult and saying, well, you're in my culture or my religion, I'm allowed to at least discuss the killing of a family member if they don't follow this particular path or, follow the dogmatic nature of our religion. And it just, to me, it's a moral issue. I don't care what religion you belong to. You could believe in nymphs for all I care. But if you're discussing the slaughter of your own family members around a table with tea or whatever it is, it's nothing to do with wanting to oppress people's ideas. It's a moral issue. It's an ethical issue. Think of a table of any selection or group of people having this discussion, and of course, damn well you'd have something to say about it. So why is it that when we do it in terms of Islam or even Christians, we're picking on them? Well, I'm sorry, I just don't like hearing the sound of people being murdered or young women being shunned or being forced into marriage. Well, you know what? Fuck you, because I've just been trying to understand the nature of why people think this. It's twofold for me. I think the indoctrination and the psychological thing is an issue, and it's such a huge one. And then you've got the other side where it's just
two different things.
One is things, and they need to be dealt with differently, definitely. But I'm
the reason why people
to this side, but I screw you on this side. I'm done being nice about this. I can understand that you are a victim of indoctrination, and that's why you think this. And I have the understanding, and maybe we can help you here. But you don't get to dictate what laws. I mean, we've had honor killings in the UK. There was a great swathe of them not too long ago, and it's flying in the face of human rights, let alone UK law. So when you have people who believe so strongly that they feel that they can break the laws, a human rights violation, let alone the laws of the country they're in, that's
severe lack of empathy as well. I was interacting with this one girl who was like, oh, blasphemy laws a bit, like, she just said they didn't exist, these things weren't happening, people weren't being killed, or she didn't care about apostates. So I was like, okay, you don't care about apostates. As a Muslim believer, this Muslim woman, Farkhunda Malik-Zada, was affected by the culture of blasphemy. She was killed by a mob of men because she said to a man outside of a mosque that she didn't believe religious charms, whereas she called them un-Islamic, and he said she was American, she was doing all this, and then men on the street attacked and brutally murdered her, and she was a devout Muslim woman. So I was like, even if you can't empathize with apostates, this is happening to your own people. And again, she says, like, I don't care. I don't understand.
Happening to Muslim people.
Yeah, lack of empathy. And this is a Muslim person not caring about something that's happening to Muslim people in another country. They just don't care.
It's incredibly fractured, isn't it? Like what Fay was saying earlier about all the different sects, as it were, of Islam. I mean, how is it not just a constant tinderbox of like, it's almost like factions, isn't it, going against one another?
Yeah, that's why we have so many problems in the Middle East. Every country that has an allegiance to a different sect is culling other sects. In Iran, they're persecuting Sunnis. In Pakistan, they're persecuting Ahmadis and other kinds of Muslims. In Saudi Arabia, they're literally declaring that they're currently in the middle of a war with Yemen. I don't understand how such a flimsy idea, and this, I mean, this could go in so many directions. We could talk about the fact that this is meant to be a divine religion that's meant to be easy to understand, and yet it's been so wildly misinterpreted in so many different ways. But it's bizarre to me that people are still using this way of, governing their countries. They're still using this as a way to govern their countries when it's so flimsy and so diverse in its interpretation. And as a human being, I understand that people are delusional. I believe to an extent I am delusional. Everyone has their own delusions. People believe in ghosts. People believe in aliens. Some people believe that the earth is flat. I'm pretty sure there's someone out there that believes their hat can talk. It does not matter what you personally believe. It does not matter what you personally believe, as long as you're not bringing it into the public sphere and pushing it down someone else's throat. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's not a lot to give up. Just don't bother people with your delusions.
One thing I found is as people are like, oh well, people in Islamic countries want Islamic law or they don't want secularism. I'm like, but why is it that brown people are not, or people of color in those countries are not allowed to be secular or atheist? Why is that associated with being white? Why?
Yeah.
Believing or not believing in God, is an inherent thing. They can choose not to.
I had this argument with someone who was we were I can't even remember what we were talking about. I believe it was about the atrocities in China that were they were like mutilating people while they were still alive. They were removing organs from Muslims while they were still alive, and I was what's happening in China is horrendous, and I'm completely against it. And the person that I was talking to was saying that we can't use Western ideals to change an Eastern idea. And I said that is as bad as ISIS. Like, I don't want to take the side of ISIS, but ISIS is not a sovereign nation. China is a sovereign nation, and they are allowing this to happen under their own noses without any repercussions. Someone has to do something about that. We can't just sit on our hands and say that is a different country, and we can't, killing people is not a Western ideal. Like, not murdering someone, not mutilating them, not abusing them. That is not a Western ideal. I feel like that is a value that most people can get behind. We don't want to kill people. And I found it ridiculous that this person was in some way justifying what was happening in this country. And I feel as though in the same vein, Muslims will say, well, in Saudi Arabia, those are those laws and people should abide by them. No, they are under this law.
By this person on Twitter, they were like, you should abide by the laws of those lands. So then I was like, well, if Western countries, say Britain, was like, okay, if you believe in Islam, you're gonna be sent to death penalty. If you criticize, if they decide to go back full Christianity, if you say anything against Christianity, what would you do? Would you not speak up about it? Would you not be like, my rights being infringed? They're like, oh, I'll just move to an Islamic country. And I'm like, how dense can you be?
How dense are you? And it's not as though their books don't talk about Christianity. How many times do we find it in the just blatantly just cussing out people from other religions, polytheists, Christians, Jews, hypocrites, every kind of person under the sun that is not a Muslim, the Quran has spoken about in some disrespectful way, and they act as though we're the only ones talking against other religions.
Yeah.
It's stupid. It's so nonsensical, and it's so obvious that so many of these people don't read their own books and don't understand their own religion.
Well, it's when they then try to shut us down, saying for free speech, and saying, criticizing Islam is hate speech. If you were to then, follow like, right, okay, we're going to ban all hate speech, the holy books would be the first ones to go.
I know this is going to sound hyperbolic, but it's bouncing around my head. Do you know what's worse than hate speech? Getting killed.
Yeah.
Or it's just baffling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and this is the argument we get all the time. Anytime we talk against Islam and we talk against blasphemy laws, the first thing they will say is, what about people's feelings? Feelings are irrelevant when people are dying. People should not be dying because they're behaving like an asshole. I'm sorry. They shouldn't be.
Something I wanted to bring up to what you guys have been talking about here over the last few minutes. So when you talk about like the honor killings and that, and specifically you were mentioning about, people killing their children. Now, in Christianity, there are verses in the Bible that say that unruly children, disrespectful children should be taken to the town square and stoned to death. Yeah. And you don't see Christians doing that, albeit though there are Christians that espouse that should be done. Here in this country, and my good friend, a raging atheist, he has made a lot of videos in the past about the NIFB, the new, I think it's International Fundamentalist Baptist. And you have people like Matt Powell and Stephen Anderson, others out there saying that it says in the Bible, that gays should be killed, and the state should be doing that, and Matt Powell, I've heard the words come right out of his mouth because he was asked by Nakasuchi, so it says in the Bible that unruly or disrespectful children should be killed, and Matt's response was, well, if it says that in the Bible, then yes, that should be followed. So we don't see anything to the magnitude that we see in the Muslim world here, but the thing is if blowback is not offered, to the Muslim world for their bad ideas and their bad actions, we have crazy, far, fundamentalist Christians in this country that have some of the same ideas, that haven't taken root, but they're trying to say some of the same things, kill gay people, kill unruly children.
I honestly think that these kinds of Christians are actually empowered by the fact that Muslim countries can do those things that they can't do. I honestly think that they are empowered by the fact that there are Islamic theocracies and they feel as though they're entitled to that same thing. And that is exactly the problem.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
crazies have an outlet. The crazies have a community, albeit from a different religion, but it's there. And that's exactly why it shouldn't exist in politics. But I'm sure before the Enlightenment, people were killing their children in the name of Christianity. Christianity had its enlightenment about 500 years ago. And that is why I keep saying that I feel as though 1400 years in, we're in a very crucial moment for Islam. We can either change it and make it as irrelevant as Christianity is nowadays, or we can radicalize it. It's one or the other.
This is why ex-Muslims simply existing and talking about it is the most important time for it to be happening. Yeah. I mean, we are really at the point where we either going to reform it or it's just going to be too far gone.
I think it can take different guises, though. Like I was saying before, in my research, I remember reading that there are some states where survivors of child marriage, are being setting up their own charities and setting up their organisations to obviously help the issue, and going through politics, because obviously it needs to be made. It needs to be made federal law. Each state has their own laws regarding this, which is one of the reasons why it's so prevalent. And 25 states have no minimum age requirement at all for marriage. 25 states in America. So just that's mad. Mm-hmm. But
I mean, we have age restrictions in Islamic countries, but they're just not taken seriously.
Yeah.
No. But it's another thing. It's probably. Again, there's when these things are pushed through, although parental consent is required in a lot of the cases, you don't always get a reason as to why the parent is consenting. It's just a signature on a bit of paper, and perhaps they ask, why is this happening? I don't know the actual sort of paperwork involved, but a lot of the research says that it's, like I said, like fundamentalist evangelical families or communities where this seems to be an issue. And so you've got that aspect of their religion or their standing in the community, which is tied into their religious ideals, which is then causing direct and future harm to their own kin, to their own children. So they might not be stoning people in the streets. They might not be hanging gay people or throwing them off of buildings. They're still causing harm to their own family members. So it's just in a different guise. So it's, and it does, for some reason, there isn't a lot of data in terms of whether or not this is happening in a lot of secular families and things like that. But I can't imagine it's as prevalent as it is in the religious side for the West. Yeah.
Hey, just real quick, totally off the subject, but I just want to respond to a bunch of people in the chat. There's a perennial favorite person that's always in the chat, always in these streams and many other channels. He's a mod over on Nakasuchi's Discord, but they're wondering where he was at. He's usually always here commenting, and so I reached out to him on Discord. I DM'd him. He got back to me, and he said that it happened the other night during one of Nick's streams, where In Time simulcasts on the Great Debate Community, and that he had posted a comment, an innocuous comment, essentially saying hello to somebody who has kind of a naughty name as their screen name, and the bot picked up on it. The algorithm of the bot picked up on it and hit him on the channel. So, but that's what Tony himself has just informed me, and I'm going to look into that after this and see if we can fix that. But just wanted to let everybody know, because a lot of people were concerned about the fact they didn't see that gentleman here. So what would you think if we threw it out to the audience and see if they have any questions for you ladies? Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, sure.
So if anybody in the chat, and I do apologize if you've already posted questions up to this point, I am just so horrible at, following the chat at all times. I'm not one of those multitaskers, albeit that you've seen me pick my phone up several times and post here and there. I can't seem to keep track of all of it. But yes, if you do have, and here's a comment that mentions somebody I know you folks know.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah. He's very, very quiet on the idea of Islamic or Christian reform.
What is
I'm
David?
sure he doesn't have an opinion on it.
Well, what is David referring to? He says, "Topic Thunder." Remember Armin Navabi's reaction to that at Atheist Assemble?
Yeah, he probably remembers this as well. Well, let's just say that he's not for it. He speaks quite passionately about it. Regarding, we had a question from an audience member. What do you think about Islamic reform? And he just. I don't
Everyone
want to say
their eyes.
he did, but he's very passionate. Faye can probably speak more to his personal ideas.
Yeah. Oh, he hates that idea. It doesn't exist. It can't happen.
What did he say? He
It's
said
not
Christianity
possible.
didn't reform, Christians did. But
Yeah.
I
don't think that there's much hope in, betting on the Islamic reform horse. It's just not going to happen.
No, I agree.
People have tried. Look, people are rotting Saudi dungeons right now for trying to reform Islam.
Women, Saudi Muslim feminists are trapped in prison. One famously, Lujain al-Hathalu, she's been tortured and abused, and they said they'll let her go if she signs and then portrays a video saying she hasn't been tortured. I admire the bravery of that woman. She's staying in prison, refusing to sign these documents and putting out these videos. So no, Islam, the religion, can't reform. Muslims, they'll reform it. They'll reform themselves. It's how they then teach it. But the religion can't. It's not going to change. So you're going to still have the crazies that take on the latch on to the fundamentalist views, just as you have fundamentalist Christians. They're always going to exist.
But they'll be crazies.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to just make them the minority, the quiet minority, the ones that most people just ignore, but people just ignore them but don't criticize them. We need to criticize them, and then they'll just be ignored.
Yeah.
Well, hey, it sounds like a lot of them are saying, and I think Christians in this country say the same thing. Well, yeah, you're entitled to your ideas, but just shut up about them, which is just insane. I mean, because
if it wasn't a problem, if people weren't being killed for them, we would be quiet about it, because I can't think of a reason why I would go on a public platform and talk about a God that I don't believe in. But we're talking about it because people are dying for this idea.
I literally
telling everybody who's speaking. So, sorry, Saff, go ahead.
Literally, the one thing I say all the time, people are like, still shut up. I'm like, you don't care that other people, human beings, are dying. I just can't understand that severe lack of empathy.
Well, right. And then I've commented in more than one thread that, when they talk about this hate and threats of violence, excuse me, but don't most of you claim Islam is the religion of peace? Like,
yep.
And
it's not true. That is a gross misrepresentation of Islam, by the way. Islam is not a religion of peace in the slightest. It doesn't mean peace. A lot of people say that.
Submission.
I think Zarkin Knight was the first one to
submission, doesn't it?
Submission.
Yeah, so I don't know why people keep saying that. Like, just Google it. It's not hard.
You have prominent
Zarkin Knight started it, and it's just been repeated since then.
Yeah.
Like since 2001.
Yeah.
It's just constantly been repeated that Islam comes from salam, and salam means peace.
It's because I remember I was talking to this ex-Muslim woman who's a lot older than me, and she was saying, growing up, she'd never heard Islam be mentioned as a religion of peace. It was only until when she was a bit older and 9/11 had happened, and Bush had referred to it in a speech, that then people kept saying it was a religion of peace. And
Obama's done the same fairly recently. We'll see, back when he was in power. Oh.
So, lots of comments have been in here. I'm not seeing any direct questions for the panel. A lot of, as often happens in the live chat, some of those here have their own little thing going on in live chat. So you often wonder if they're paying attention to the broadcast with some of the off-topic things they talk about in the chat, but I've done that myself when I've been watching something. So I think we've been going like in about an hour and 40 minutes. I think that I'm sure we could have gone longer if the entire panel had showed up, but I want to go around the room here now and see if anybody has any final thoughts. And we'll start with Kelly. Do you have any final thoughts on what we talked about today?
Oh goodness. Well, I'm certainly going to go and hug my little girl that much tighter tonight. I said when I got involved in this that I have a very sort of benign relationship with religion. It's more of a curiosity to me than anything. And the further I've gone through this journey, as it were, I've had to let it in. I've had to let people's stories in just to see how damaging it can be. And just the plethora of experiences that people have had. And you can't help without being hurt, I don't think. And so whilst I don't suffer negative consequences in regards to religion myself, maybe as a white non-Christian woman in a relatively free Western country, whatever I can do to help, certainly these young ladies, they're free to send me a message and whenever it gets too much. But you must understand me when you say you have my utmost respect. And if my little one grows up to be anything like you two, I'd be very proud. And thank you for what you're doing. You're amazing.
And we'll go to Fay next. We'll end with Saff, since her channel was what was featured at the beginning of the show. So Fay, your final thoughts, and please, if there's anything that you feel we missed, both of you take as much time as you need. We don't necessarily have to get out of here.
As usual, I feel as though I hogged most of the conversation because I just get so riled up about these issues. Kelly, I really feel like you didn't say much. I don't know what.
No, this was going to be an experience for me. I knew there's no hiding from this. I see what happens to you on Twitter. I've heard Miriam Namazi and I've heard Sadia talk about it at Atheist Assemble. There's something about just hearing these stories, and you can't shy away from them, even if you have no connection to them in terms of your familial or even your community. I'm here to learn from you guys, because I think I need some of that strength that you have, because I want to help you fight, and I don't know if I'm strong enough. And just to understand how you get through it and how you remain empathetic is just amazing to me. So I'm here to listen and to learn and to help. So don't worry about that. I've got my own channel to warble on.
Hey, real quick before you go on, I just want to say to my good friend Saka account in the live chat, don't worry, my friend. I am going to address your question before we leave. So just be waiting for that. Go ahead, Fay.
So last night I had this profound moment of PTSD because my Pakistani friend and she's a Muslim, she had invited me home because she said, "Do you want food?" And I had just obliged, and I didn't think twice about it. but I had gone back to her home and I saw the condition that she was living in, and we shared some stories. And I had this profound moment of PTSD, and I just had this urge to tell her to get out. Like, I didn't tell her to leave her religion. I didn't try to guide her away. I just incepted the idea that, have you ever thought of leaving this hell? Like, this is a hell for you. And she said, if I leave, my whole family will disconnect with me. My siblings will think bad of me, and no one will want me for anything. Her entire valuation was based profoundly on what her family thought of her. And it brought me back like 5 years. It brought me back to my mental state 5 years ago. And I just could not explain to her how awful it was to think in that way. And I didn't. I genuinely didn't want to put her through that, because she's honestly in a much better position that I was in, but not so much better that she's good, you know? And that's exactly why I do what I do. I feel like curious minds, strong minds out there, they want their freedom, and I just want to normalize that for them. I don't want there to be homes where people are thrown out simply because they don't want to be exactly what their mother or their father or their aunts or their cousins are. I just want parents to stop throwing their kids out. That is the only thing I want. And for the most part, I don't want to be a serious person who talks about serious things all the time, because honestly, I'm quite light-humored for a depressing person. Like, I'm quite funny and quirky, and I talk about all my problems in such a way that it makes everyone uncomfortable around me, and I find that hysterical. But I can't talk about these things in a jokey way, and that kills me because I want to.
Maybe there'll come a time where you will be able to.
I hope so. I hope so.
And before we move on to Saff, I did neglect to have topic. Where can people find you on YouTube? Just by looking at your name, right?
Yeah, well, you think that, wouldn't you, John? But yeah,
Right.
when you put in Topic Thunder, it'll ask if you mean the Ben Stiller film. You don't.
You mean Tropic Thunder?
Yeah. Just when you punch Topic Thunder into the search engine on YouTube, the first thing that comes up is everything about Tropic Thunder, and then in little, and then in little blue letters it says, "Are you sure you meant Topic Thunder?" or something like that? And then,
you really want to watch it, so okay then. Yeah, but you'll
don't stop looking until you see my beautiful artwork.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's unmistakable. Yeah. Screw Ben Stiller and Robert Downey Jr. Come to me.
Yeah, fuck those guys.
And Fay, your channel. Again, I think we have a hint on the screen there underneath you with the name what your channel is.
So my channel is called Fay The Most Gracious. Right now, my Twitter is completely locked, so you can't find me there. I'm using a backup account, but I'm trying not to use it too frequently. Otherwise, the Twitter bot, like, why did you make a new account? We told you we were getting to your appeal. So I'm trying not to use that one too frequently. Don't worry about that. But my channel name is Fay The Most Gracious. Feel free to subscribe and give me your monies, because the Israelis are not paying me, despite what everyone might tell you.
Honestly, I don't know why they think that, like, we're all poor. Like, I'm sat here, like,
We are
working
so poor.
poor. Like, no one's giving me money for this, and I don't want it.
You're not getting that.
We're still the brown minority, working class minority. Yeah. Okay.
You guys aren't getting all that big ex-Muslim shill money.
No, there is no ex-Muslim money. I don't know where that came from.
And Saff, your final words on the discussion tonight, and let everybody know about your channel again.
So the biggest thing I'm taking away from this, I'm never gonna shut up until people are stopped being killed for thinking differently, for loving somebody differently. It's just, I don't understand the lack of empathy some people have. I don't know why, like me speaking, I've seen like I see so terrible for just saying these things exist, I will continue to do that. My priorities lie with giving young ex-Muslims a space, an outlet, and that's what I do through my YouTube channel with the rest of my team, the Sinning Skeptics. If you look up the videos, we have the links to everyone's sort of contact details on Twitter. I was going to say something else. The reason why I really do and seeing it actualize was when someone I went to school with messaged me not long after the first episode went out and thanked me for doing what I was doing and talked about their closeted sexuality, and eventually asked a question on our show saying, I am a bi closeted ex-Muslim. I didn't even know they had left Islam. I was like, this is a decision you have to make on your own, you know. Our content can help and support you. I can answer any questions you can, but this is, you know, it's your choice. And then just to see someone had been able to choose for themselves, even though they're still closeted, just being visible to people that know me, like, you can talk to me about these things if you are struggling. And that's what I aim to do. I aim to help the young ex-Muslims that really, really do need it and give them a platform, as well as young Muslims who doubt and criticize their religion. I've had conversations with a lot of them, and there's a few of them that do speak out for us and do speak up with ex-Muslims, and then they get called Kafirs, they get called apostates, even though they're still trying to hold on to their belief. They're trying to stand up for the good parts that they see in their religion, and, you know, they're willing to criticize the dangerous parts. And it's just being able to give people like that a platform, and that's what I aim to do.
I have a lot of respect for that, actually.
Well, and
The ability to just...
we get that a lot in this country, where Christians want to look at other Christians who are espousing ideas that they find to be, you know, against the religion, and then they want to call them, say that they're not really Christians, you know. So it happens. So, all right, we're going to get out of here. You can find me here on Saturdays. You can find me on a Raging Atheist channel on Wednesday nights, and my own channel is the Amateur Conversationalist. Coming up next month, we are going to make every other episode of the Amateur Conversationalist, which I do weekly on Sundays, is going to be talking to ex-Muslims about their journey out of Islam. And I put a poll up on Twitter the other day to pick a name for that podcast. And
can we have a drum roll?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, drum roll. But the name chosen by the people, and we want to give the people what they want, was the Apostate Alliance.
Yay.
So, the Apostate Alliance will start sometime next month, and look for notifications for that. And I think, as a couple people pointed out, that's a good kind of a generic name.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about ex-Muslims, but of course, anybody who's a non-believer is welcome to come on over and join. And in the future, you know, after we have some ex-Muslims on, we can have some other variety of apostates on for certain. All right, one real quick thing before we go. My good friend Saka posted this question at Great Debate Community. This might be a long question. How do we become less tolerant of intolerant views without becoming intolerant ourselves? And there's a second part of that. He says, isn't that a paradox? Very good question, Saka. You always throw those brain teasers out there. But I guess what I would say is that intolerance of intolerance is not intolerant.
Yeah.
If I could just question a less confusing way, I think that we need to empathize and sympathize with people and criticize ideas. I think the line becomes very blurred between criticizing human beings in a very personal manner. Unless they are public figures, it's very likely that they're ignorant, and I think that is something that many people do not have sympathy for, and we should have sympathy for. it is something that people are deficient in if they can't think for themselves, and that is something that we have to listen and understand before we take our day out on those people. Obviously, there are people out there who want to hurt other people. I'm by no means saying that we should give those people any chance to be intolerant, but ideas that are intolerant have to be criticized without mercy.
Yeah.
Virulently tolerant. Like, we have to criticize those ideas until they are erased. But when it comes to people, because people are nuanced and there are several layers to them, you know, the background that I came from was an extremely radical background. I was extremely, extremely anti-Semitic. I was extremely homophobic as a radical Muslim. And kindness that was shown towards me and my curiosity was the thing that brought me out of it. And that is why I will always hold people to a higher standard. That is why I will always treat people first with kindness, because I believe that they are capable of change, because I was capable of change. And Lord knows I never thought I was capable of change. And that is how I think we need to deal with people. People have to be treated with dignity. And ideas, especially terrible ones, deserve no respect and deserve no mercy until they can prove that they deserve those things.
Right. And I'm glad you said what you said. I mean, because, yeah, you have to vocally go against, you know, the really, you know, the violence, the, you know, the hatred and everything. But there are people like on the fringe of those fundamentalist ideas that if, you know, people like you reach out to them, they can be convinced to, you know, to leave that hatefulness and bigotry behind. So, yeah, I was being flippant, of course, because, you know, if you're intolerant I mean, well, it's like, for instance, if you are intolerant of bigotry, that doesn't make you a bigot. You know what I mean? I mean, you know, bigots would like to say that you're being bigoted for disagreeing with their ideas, but that's a form of justifiable prejudice. You know, so if you're intolerant of people that are calling for the murder of other people, technically it's being intolerant, but it's virtuous intolerance because of the horrible things that they're, you know, espousing.
The word tolerance bothers me a bit because it implies we have to tolerate something in the first place. Why should we have to tolerate bad ideas? And especially when, like, you know, you're intolerant to homosexuals. Well, we shouldn't have to tolerate sexuality. Sexuality is sexuality. That's a part of a person. No one should have an opinion on that apart from the person who it is. Yeah, so intolerance as a word bothers me.
Kelly, you have any thoughts on this?
Well, it's one of those things where language as a philosophy comes into play, and I love the etymology of language. You know, the structure of how we use words and how they've changed and things like that. But it just seems, certainly in the last few years, perhaps more concentrated on the internet than in the real world, where, you know, words are almost like labels in and of themselves. So once something is said, that's it, and there's no nuance to it. So I think just labeling anyone is intellectually lazy. And like Fay said, she's a perfect example of somebody who believed so stringently a certain way, and she was able to come out of it. And that was through education, empathy, you know, and understanding, and having a listening ear, having a critical mind that she developed herself, essentially, given that how.
But also people putting up with my bullshit. But also people putting up with bullshit. If people did not, if I asked a question, for example, because I was curious about homosexuality when I was younger, I would ask a lot of questions about it. And if people just dismissed me, I feel as though I would still be as homophobic as I was, because it was something that I didn't understand. And I think in many ways something that I was afraid of because I didn't understand it. And I have a good friend who's like seen me change. He was one of the first people to talk to me. He's a secularist, he's an atheist. And he would, you know, put up with my nonsense because I would say, oh, I'm intolerant of homosexuals because I think that homosexuality is a choice. And he would take me up on that and be like, why do you think it's a choice? And we would have a discussion about it. I genuinely think that this is why I'm a bit of a libertarian about people speaking exactly what is on their minds. If they have racist thoughts, they should say those things so we can talk about them, instead of them becoming a subculture and then creating more problems for us. I think this nature of people being disallowed to talk about exactly what they think, because I come from an extremely racist family, and I feel as though if those things weren't said, I wouldn't have never been able to uncover the deep-seated racism that's in our communities. And it is deep-seated, and it is something that is not talked about, and I really don't understand why. And people should be able to talk about exactly what's on their minds, and we should be able to have a mature discussion, even if the discussion may be silly to some people, like the idea that homosexuality is a choice, or that it causes AIDS, or it's caused by frogs, or I don't know, some guy said that somewhere.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of Alex Jones, who claims the water is making frogs.
Yeah.
I did American politics, studying him as a person.
See,
I don't know how people watch him. He's just so angry all of the time. Like, I felt my blood pressure rising just sitting there.
It's a dumb idea, but he should be allowed to say it, and we should be allowed to have a conversation about it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
people should be able to say whatever they want, but then they have to realize, well, then they might suffer repercussions from that, or they're going to get a response to that.
Absolutely.
All right. So thanks, Saka, for that question. Now, Saka has made this broadcast much like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We had our first post-credit scene in this episode by asking that question. So thank you all for stopping by for this. And thank you all, Kelly, Saff, Fay, for being here. All three of you are wonderful human beings, and I am so glad I had the chance to do this stream with you. Good night, or good afternoon. I don't know. I guess good night for those folks in Britain, and good afternoon for those folks here in the U.S.